Hello students, good morning. Here your teacher Dolce, and today we are going to start the chapter Sexual Reproduction in Flowering Plants after your holidays or the summer break. So before we start the sexual reproduction in flower, you must know that in a flower two kind of reproductive parts are present. First one is male part and second one is female part. Now come to the male reproductive part, that is said to be the abdomen. So stamen is the male reproductive part of the flower. Whole this part represents the stamen. The stamen consists of two parts. First one is anther, which contain the pollen grain, and second one is the filament, that is the connection between the anther and the flower. And the pollen grains that present in the anther are a kind of reproductive unit. Okay, so each matured pollen grain consists of a tube cell or a tube nucleus which has capacity to form the pollen tube and to undergo the sexual reproduction. So it has two kind of cell. First is tube cell, it comprises of tube nucleus, and other are said to be the vegetative cell. The two cells are said to be the male gametes. So in each of the flowering plant, two male gametes are present. Second is the female reproductive part, that is said to be the carpel, and the carpel comprises of three further units. First one is said to be the stigma, that is the receptacle or uppermost part of the carpel. Second one is style, that is the connection between the stigma and the ovary. Okay, so it is a kind of support to stigma. Base part of the carpel is called ovary, and ovary contains ovules. It is the lowermost part of the female reproductive part. In ovary, one or more ovules can be present, and each ovule it has a female gamete. This diagram shows you the ovule or the egg that is present on the lower part is said to be the female gamete. Okay, so this is the flower that represents the reproductive parts of the plant. Whenever the flower that contain two part, means male or female part, if both parts are present in the same flower, those flowers are said to be the bisexual flowers. And the example of those are hibiscus, that is China rose, and the simple rose. And the part that are present at the periphery are said to be the male part, and the parts that are present at the center are called the female parts. Okay, these male and female parts are necessary for the formation of new plants. Similarly, from those plant, new flowers present. For example, in papaya, separate flowers are present to contain male parts, and separate plants are present to female part. Same is in the watermelon. Male flowers are present on another plant, and female are present on another plant. Those kind of flowers are said to be the unisexual flower. So flowers are of two types, bisexual and unisexual. Bisexual, if two are present in the same, and if singly present, they are said to be the unisexual type of flowers. Next, come to the example that we observe in this diagram is that the flower for fertilization to take place, firstly, there is a necessary point that the pollen grains that are produced on the stamen part, that is on the carpel, the anther part, should be transferred to the stigma of the female plant. And the process, if same flower, means from one flower, the pollen are transferred from stamen to the stigma of its own flower, that is said to be the self-pollination. And if there is transfer of pollen grains from different flower to another plant, if the transfer of pollen grains takes place from one flower to another, means between two different plants, that is said to be the cross pollination. This is the process to represent cross. Cross means two different flowers are present, and this transfer can be done with the help of air, that is said to be the wind pollination, with the help of water, or with the help of animals. Any type of agent can result in transfer of pollen grains from one flower to the other in cross pollination. Next, come to that when the pollen grain it lands on the stigma of the female part of the flower. On landing, it produces a pollen tube, and that pollen tube it grows from the stigma part to the style part, and the growing part is said to be the pollen tube. While this pollen tube originate, the male gametes, the two male gametes that are pink in color are shown in the diagram, they travel along the pollen tube and followed by the polar nucleus. These male gametes ultimately, when come in contact with the ovule part in the ovary, okay, they penetrate like the diagram shows. There they undergo the fertilization with the female gamete and result in formation of zygote and the seed. So the fusion of first male gamete with the female gamete result in formation of zygote. Secondly, when this fertilization occurs, the second male gamete, it also penetrates inside the ovule. After formation of zygote, second male gamete, it fertilizes with the polar nuclei and it result in formation of triploid because there are two nucleus are present already. One is transferred by male gamete and a nutritive tissue is formed that is said to be the endosperm. And endosperm is necessary for the providing nourishment to the growing embryo. And when the zygote formed by fertilization between egg and the male gamete part, it divides continually. Multiple divisions it undergo and it result in formation of an embryo within the ovule. And these diagrams brilliantly explain the formation of the embryo inside the ovule. And the nourishment is provided to this growing embryo with the help of endosperm. When the ovule develops and it turns up into a seed, means ultimately this zygote, it turns up into a seed. Whenever the seed is come in contact with the soil and it gain specific or sufficient amount of nourishment or the sunlight or the warmth, that plant, it germinates on the soil, and the shedding of the seed to the soil and result in formation of plumule and the radicle. That process is said to be the germination of the seed. So this is the general introduction of your chapter. Tomorrow we will start up the chapter.